sestre, prijatelji Matice Srpske, dobrodošli na još jedno predavanje koje organizuje Odbor Odeljenja za društvene nauke Matice Srpske. Poseban pozdrav danas za našeg gosta, dr. Ofika Ilija iz Izraela. Istorija nosi teške momente za sve narode. Nosi se ove u teškim uslovima, nosi ratni sukob. Onaj narod koji hoće da preživi sve te nevolje koje nosi istorija, mora da vodi računa, kao što nam se jako dobro poznato, ne samo o svom fizičkom opstanku, već i svom identitetu. Očuvanju identiteta, u njegovom razvoju, ogromnu ulogu ima obrazovanje. Obrazovanje shvaćeno kao obrazovni sistem povezan sa državom, ali i na druge načine. Danas ćemo čuti od naših gosta jedno vrlo zanimljivo predavanje kako su se stvari razvijale sa jevrejskim identitetom, sa obrazovanjem najpre bez države, a zatim sa državom. Ja ću sada prepustiti reč našem Viši Đurkoviću, koji će našeg gosta predstaviti.
Dear guest, poštovani profesore Šutiću, potpredsjedniče Matice, uvaženi direktore, evo drago mi je da danas je kolega Zečević u svojstvu novog direktora sa nama i nadam se da će se nastaviti saradnja i Matice i nadalje. Uvaženi gospodine Pavloviću, sa nama je danas i direktor Centra za društvene i političke istraživanja sa svojim kolegama iz Banja Luke. Poštovane kolege, profesore Despotoviću, moramo ovde da istaknemo ipak na domaćem terenu, dragi kolege, što bi rekli četa mala, ali odebrana, uključujući i Novosadski deo instituta, da tako kažem ovde sa kolegom Sašom. Tako da mi je stvarno drago još jedan se zahvalim Matici i predsedniku Staniću koji je na zasluženom odboru danas, ali ovo je jedna jako lepa tradicija koju smo uspostavili poslednjih 7-8 godina, da zaista vredni goste koji je institut uspeo da dovede u Beograd, o istom trošku, što bi rekli, dovedemo i u Maticu i što znači i podelu znanja, ali s druge strane da se podsjetimo svi ove godina u kojoj slavimo 200 godina kontinuiranog izloženja Letopisa Matice Srpske, dakle kao najstarijeg književnog časopisa koji kontinuirano izlazi i kao što znamo ovi prevodi po pravilu uspemo da ih sredimo i ostaju objavljeni u Matici, što je opet negde i privilegija za ljude koji dođu sa strane. Naš današnji gost je pre svega politički filozof i politički teoretičar, dakle kolega koji je svoj doktorat radio na UCL, dosta prestižne institucije u Britaniji, University College of London, poznat po tome što ga je osnovao Jeremy Bentham, dakle, i on se bavio pred svega političkom teorijom, to je i dalje ono što je njegovo najvažnije, dakle, polje istražovanja, i objavio je taj doktorat kao knjigu o Johnu Seldenu, jednom vrlo važnom, dosta zaboravljenom britanskom misliocu, i sebe vrlo jasno definiše kao konzervativnog političkog teoretičara i mislioca bazično. Međutim, osim tog interesovanja, on je u praktičnom smislu izuzetno aktivan i uspešan, moram da kažem, na raznim poljima, uključujući ovo danas o kome će govoriti. Između ostalog, ono gde je najviše angažovan je Theodor Herzl institut, koji su on i Jovan Hanzović, čiju smo knjigu Vrlina nacionalizma preveli i objavili pre par godina. I on je zamenik direktora, direktor je gospodin Hanzoni, koji rade zaista te izuzetno uspešne seriju kongresa o nacionalnom konzervativizmu, ali osim toga on recimo vodi jedan konzorcijum evropskih konzervativnih organizacija koje pokušavaju da definišu šta je danas obrazovanje ili bezbednost sa konzervativnih pozicija i tako dalje. predaje na raznim univerzitetima i tako dalje. Međutim, što se tiče praktičnog djelovanja, u samom Izraelu on je recimo član izraelsko-italijanskog zajedničkog tijela za arheološke iskopavanje, što, kao što znate, za te dve države je jedna strašno bitna institucija i konačno dolazimo do ovoga zbog čega se me zamolio da danas napravi ovako nastavno predavanje, a to je da je on član državnog, odnosno nacionalnog savjeta Izraela za obrazovanje. I u tom smislu ja ne bih dužio stvar, imamo čoveka koji vidjet ćete jedan, što bi rekli u ovo staro marksističko vreme, dijalektički spoj teorije i prakse kako smo to učili, on zaista to radi na jedan vrlo vredan način i vjerujem da ćemo danas imati dosta mogućnosti da čujemo njihovo iskustvo koje, kao što znate, i za nas vrlo važno i s druge strane posle imat ćemo mogućnosti da napravimo debatu o tom iskustvu i o raznim drugim stvarima. Anyway, thank you very much. I have a little bit of introduction about you and the reasons why I wanted you for this specific lecture. So in the start, after that we will have debate, the secretary will translate the apologies.
So, first of all, I want to thank you all very much for coming here and having me today. And I'm very excited to be for the first time for me in Serbia in general and in Novi Sad particularly. And I'm finding new friends and interesting people here, and so thank you very much.
Hvala vam svima što ste došli danas, hvala vam za poziv. Vrlo sam srećan i uzbuđen što sam u Srbiji prvi put i drago mi je da sam i u Beogradu i u Novom Sadu po prvi put i da mogu da upoznam neke nove, zanimljive ljude i evo sad ćemo polako krenuti na predavanje.
Okay, so I was asked to present the role of education in the development and the fostering of national identity in Israel. But I believe that for various reasons that will become clear, it's necessary to start not in 1948 when Israel was founded, but actually at the founding, much earlier, in the 1880s and even earlier when the foundation of Jewish Zionist education were laid. Because upon these foundations, subsequent Zionist and later Israeli state education was built.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Maybe if they have questions, you can say, but I'm following the written. So, very good. The beginnings, the first period is 1850 to 1880, and we have to start in this period to understand the challenges that were facing Jewish nationalists in the 19th century. Some were common to other nations, but some were unique. So, like many other nations of the time, the Jewish nation lacked its own national state, national organization, but it also faced several additional challenges that were unique to it. One, it was a minority everywhere, including in its own historical land. So, for example, like you today have Kosovo, but you have Kosovo, but also Republika Srpska and Serbia, where we are majority, but we didn't have that at all. So, we are a minority everywhere. And second, we lacked a common language. Since Hebrew had become, by this time, mainly liturgical language. And sometimes even franca between people, they used it, but it was not really spoken as a native language anywhere. Therefore, the common Jewish culture that existed, it was mainly religious and historical, but had very little to do with everyday life. So, while many other nations, like Serbians, had a large population scattered among several countries, but the Jews lacked a common language and a territory where they were a majority. So, when the cultural Zionist activity started, from the 1850s until the 1880s, they struggled to remedy those two challenges. Much before the political organization of Zionism, which was devoted to political independence, was born. It was born only in the 1890s. So we are talking about the pre-political stage. Several intellectuals and activists, mainly in Central and Eastern Europe, started a cultural renaissance of the Hebrew language from the 1850s onwards. They founded several newspapers and journals in the Hebrew language, aimed at reviving it as a modern spoken language. They started to publish poems, reviews, and short stories, and in 1853, the first Hebrew language novel, Ahavat Zion, The Love of Zion, was published by Abraham Mappel. Some of these cultural activities, commonly known as Chovevei Zion, like the Lovers of Zion, went a step further, creating new organizations devoted to resettlement of Jews in their historical homeland. One of the most famous among these was your countryman, if you can say, Rabbi Yehuda Alkalai. He was born in Sarajevo in 1798, and around 1830 he became the rabbi of the Jewish community in the town of Zemun, which today is in Belgrade. And by the way, one of the members of that synagogue was Simon Herzl, the grandfather of the founder of political Zionism, and there is the argument that he was influenced by the ideas of Alkalai. So, as early as 1843, in his book Minchat Yehuda, The Offering of Judah, Alkalai proposed the revival of Hebrew language and the resettlement of Jews in their historical homeland. In 1852, he established an actual society for settlement in Eretz Israel, and when he was 76 years old, he moved to Jerusalem in 1874 and died there only 4 years later. So he died basically when he was 80 years old. Here you have a picture of him and his wife in 1874. So, if you want, you can add it. Yesterday I was in Zebulun and I visited Alkalai Street in Zebulun that you have in his honor, where he used to live also.
Dakle, juče smo organizovali naš mladi kolega koji radi doktorat o cionizmu, Nikola Tocakov, i juče bio njegov turistički vodič i odveo ga je, dakle, da vidi ulicu Rabina Alkalaja, ulicu Teodora Herzla i sinagogu koja je sada kafana, ali još postoji tamo, i bili su i na groblju, našli su grobove pomenutog Simona Herzla, dede Teodora Herzla i babi njegov.
So, it's important to stress that the settlement and cultural activities were part of the same vision of practice. So, it's settling and the cultural activity was viewed as the same thing. For those groups who envisioned their settling in the homeland, they engaged in self-education toward the settlement, including learning actual agricultural techniques, planning for the structure of localities of the new settlements, finding funds for buying land, and so forth. So it also included the settlers learning the Hebrew language, as they hoped that their conversations in the old land would be carried out in that language, especially since many of them came from different countries with different languages, and for example, among the first groups of settlers, there were people from the Russian Empire, the Balkans, Yemen, and other places who could not speak the same language, only Hebrew they understood. So this was the goal. So this was the first stage until, let's say, 1880. So the second stage is 1880 to 1870. 1970, of course. These cultural activities bore fruit from the 1880s with the immigration of tens of thousands of Jews from many countries to the historical Jewish homeland, areas of the then Ottoman Empire, and the creation in the next 2 decades of about 30 new type Jewish communities, settlements called Moshava. The Moshava was a settlement, a new settlement, where all the people there were Jewish, new Jewish settlers. So their common language had to be Hebrew. So significantly, in the 1880s, we also saw the beginning of really serious efforts to make Hebrew a mother tongue, an everyday spoken language. These efforts were spearheaded by Eliezer Ben Yehuda and the Committee for the Hebrew Language, who together with other cultural activists effected a lexical modernization of Hebrew, a bit like Vuk, what's his name? Like Vuk Karadžić that did with the alphabet and lexical modernization in Serbia. The same is what Eliezer Ben Yehuda. So new words and expressions were adopted, and many new words were either coined anew or borrowed from foreign languages. And by 1908, Ben Yehuda was able to publish a first dictionary of modern Hebrew. And the revival of the language was so successful that by 1921, 1 year before Ben Yehuda died, the new British rulers of the area declared that Hebrew was one of the official languages of the British Mandate territory. So within one generation, it became a spoken language. However, I want to point out that for other intellectual efforts of Ben Yehuda and other intellectuals, the most important and the real breakthrough came not through the intellectual circles, but by another avenue, the educational activities in the kindergartens and the schools. In the 1880s, when the first kids were being born in the Moshavot, the issue of what language they should be educated in arose. Because again, their parents came, one from Russia, one from Serbia, one from Germany. So at home, the family spoke different languages. And although there was some use of Hebrew, it was still very mechanical and artificial because it was not native to anyone. So many wished for the kids to be educated in Hebrew, but it was seen as impractical since there were not any Hebrew speakers that were native Hebrew speakers, and virtually no text suitable for little children. Because remember, as I said before, all the cultural activities, of the last decades have been by intellectuals writing novels and poems and essays, very, for educated people, not for little kids. So, however, a small group of women organized together to open Hebrew language kindergartens, in which only Hebrew was spoken. So the little kids came there and spoke only Hebrew in the kindergarten. They started on their own translating from Russian, Polish, German, kid stories, rhymes, this stuff of thing, and nursery rhymes as well. They asked established poets and writers to compose new songs and new educational texts that would be adequate for kids who are 3 or 4 or 5 years old. So the challenge of this young women kindergarten teacher was met on part of the greatest Hebrew poets then living, including Chaim Nachman Bialik, the acknowledged national poet of the period. They composed short rhymes and short stories that are still being sung these days in today's Israeli kindergartens. So my child, when he went to kindergarten, he learned these songs and short stories written 120 years ago. So within less than 1 decade, there were scores of Hebrew language kindergartens in the Moshavot, and of course within 2 or 3 years, another effort was needed because now those kids grew up and they were going to school, and so you needed elementary school material. So I want to stress that the success of the Hebrew-speaking kindergartens and schools was so great that it expanded to the diaspora, where those group of Jews that hoped to eventually immigrate to the homeland set up an institution that would educate the children in Hebrew speakers. So there were schools or organizations that taught in Hebrew all over Europe and Asia and Africa. In this way, several future leaders of the Jewish state, including its founder and first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, while growing up and living in Russia or the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they attended educational institutions where teaching was in Hebrew language. So they grew up as English speakers. So soon, Hebrew-speaking high schools and eventually higher education and universities opened. So this was until 1917. The next educational challenge facing the growing Jewish population came after the British conquered the area that is today Israel from the Ottomans and established the mandate of an official mandate for the creation of a Jewish national home. So the challenge was to create, there was the language of Hebrew, now that we needed a common national culture. So the new educational institutions found themselves increasingly needing not merely to educate in the Hebrew language, but also for a Hebrew national consciousness. So since Jews were returning to their homeland from very, very different countries, there are very different cultural, religious, and political notions. So there was a very real need to unite these very different views into a common national culture. The answer of the Zionist educational system was to focus on three main pillars of early Zionism. So the idea of the coming of to the homeland, which is in Hebrew Aliyah, it is like ascending, because the Jewish homeland is seen as the summit of the mountain. So wherever you live, you are lower, and then you go back to your homeland. Then the second is the creation of the Jewish settlements for these incoming across the homeland, which is called Hitcheshvut, so settling new settlements. And the third is providing the settlements with defense, Haganah, because many of them were founded in areas that were isolated. There was a small settlement of a few, 20, 30, 40 people in an area that around was all Arab and Muslim, so it was this meant that in effect the creation of cultural and political Jewish entities that were parallel to those of the British Empire ruling the territory. So the goals, of course, were at times indifferent and other hostile toward the Jewish national goals. So the British created the educational system, but the Jewish organization created a parallel Jewish organization of education and cultural ideas. So the Zionist organization, which is the Jewish political organ of organization, created a whole framework of activities in the educational, cultural, and social field that were parallel to those of the British mandate. There was a Zionist educational organization, Zionist publishing houses, and Zionist newspapers, Zionist theaters and Zionist musical groups, as well as Zionist healthcare organizations. Moreover, the Zionist educational system did not merely educate students who follow the three pillars of Zionism, but actually train them to carry them out. So this idea of training is very important. These are true for the youths growing up in their homeland, as well as the much larger groups of those still growing up in the diaspora within the Zionist organization framework. From the outset, the young men and women that were being educated towards returning to the homeland and reclaiming it were also trained in various agricultural, manufactural, and cultural disciplines that were deemed useful for when they will join a new settlement. Indeed, in many cases, the nucleus that would settle in a new area was created abroad by young men and women that organized and trained as a group, so that they would be essentially already function as a community from the very moment they broke new ground arriving there. These groups usually settled in newly founded communal settlements called kibbutzim and moshavim, which were communal. They were agricultural settlements which also had a security dimension since they expanded the borders of the areas settled by Jews. The self-defense elements were added early on, especially after the small Jewish settlement of Tel Chai was raided by Arabs in 1920, killing 8 of the defendants. including a famous war hero, Joseph Troubadour. Various self-defense organizations developed for the new settlements, prominently so the Shomer, meaning guardian, and the Haganah, meaning defense. More significantly, several youth movements developed, some directly inspired by Troubadour heroism, and focusing on training for settlement as well as for defense. Some of the more prominent were organizations like Halutz, Hashomer Hatzair, Hanwar Avel, and so on, Beitar, so on. All of them combining educational, cultural, and social activities for youth after school hours. Many such youth movements were created in countries around the world, with eventually hundreds of thousands of young Jews attending them. Two of these young Jews, where one was Chaim Bar-Lev, born in 1924, and David Elazar, born in 1925, both grew up in Yugoslavia, then Yugoslavia, and they both attended in their teens the youth Zionist organization Hashomer Hatzair, that was active in one in Zagreb and one in Sarajevo, and they eventually left Yugoslavia as a youth group in 1940 and joined the Jewish National Militias and then the Israeli Army, becoming successively chiefs of staff of the IDF. So this is David Elazar. Yes, this is him who became native of Sarajevo, who then eventually became Israeli chief of staff in the Yom Kippur War. The next stage is 1948 to 1980, educating a new country. So, when the Jewish state was born in 1948, the political independence was achieved only thanks to the two earlier great achievements of Zionism, the arrival of the English Hebrew language and the ingathering of the Jews to their homeland. But the newly born state educational system needed to confront at the same time several challenges. One, turning the parallel structure that had grown under the British rule into a unified state structure, because it wasn't a state structure. Two, incorporate a great mass of new Jewish immigrants. Many of them were actually refugees that had nothing. They came from, they flew going away from Europe after the Second World War, or from Arab countries where they were expelled. And three, effecting those goals while the country was in the midst of a war for survival with very minimal resources. So we have to find a way with very minimal resources to do it. The state pressured the many educational institutions and groups that were active in the pre-state period to unite towards creating a single national educational system. Some groups, like the religious group, were permitted to have a sub-organization for national religious education, but still within the confines of the national system. And the same are true for the Arabs that were left in Israel. They are permitted to have Arab language schools, but the curriculum in the schools is still the national one. Small groups like ultra-religious Jewish groups or some Christian church schools opted out of the national system, but they received essential and minimal financial assistance from the state. In this way, the vast majority of the country's children came under the lies of a Jewish Zionist identity for the state, which continues to stress the emphasis on the three pre-state principles of ingathering, settlement, and security. Especially the latter element of security was regarded as vital in a young state that suffered very real military threats from all its neighbors and had to fight three wars, large wars within its first 19 years of independence. Thus, all Jewish schoolgoers, women as well as men, were educated to expect that at 18 they will be drafted for a significant military service for a period of 2 to 3 years. Moreover, the expectation was that even after finishing the service, veterans would be called every year for a periodic service in the reserve of about 1 month, maybe 2 months, sometimes 1 month, even up to 50 years of age. This frame of mind of perpetual service affected the whole society and was reflected in the principles and ideas transmitted by the educational system. Another great challenge for the young state was the incorporation of gigantic masses of new immigrants into the country. In the first 2 years after independence, the population of the state doubled from about 600,000 to 1.2, 1.3 million in only 2 years. So, resulting in great masses of people living in tent camps with only the barest services. Unlike earlier waves of immigrants, were for the most part young idealists that had trained toward the coming and were expecting hardship, the new immigrants in 1948 were a mix of all groups, with young and old, many refugees from Nazi Germany that had no possession, and many didn't know any word of Hebrew. So while the youngest of the newcomers could be easily integrated into schools and the regular education system, that was not the case with the many hundreds of thousands of new immigrants who were beyond school age. So someone who's 30 or 40 or 50 years old, but he cannot go to school, but still they needed to be taught to speak in Hebrew. So to address this challenge, with the very limited resources at the government disposal, it initiated a great program of education in the camps, in many cases carried out by young soldiers, mainly women, who were trained to teach the newcomers, particularly the so-called Ulpan, which is an instruction studio system, was developed as a kind of crash course of Hebrew designed to teach even people with absolutely no knowledge of the language to become conversant, minimally conversant within a few weeks. So this is in 1955, the Ulpan. These programs, we could say, were overall successful, and Israel indeed successfully integrated this great wave of immigration, not only in the economic and social aspect, but also culturally into a cohesive national identity with a very high level of adherence to the notion of service to the nation, pertaining to serving in the military, but also other endeavors like starting new Jewish settlements in desert areas, or doing some kind of other national service to help disadvantaged groups. Now the last stage is, I call it prosperity and struggle, 1980 to 2024. So I described the earlier stages, which were, there were great organizational and economic hardships, but since the 1980s, Israel's economy and society has entered into the group of developed countries, enjoying a growing level of economic prosperity, as well as very high levels of life expectancy and education of the population. This created for some years a tendency to relax the very high focus on Zionist education and enjoy the achievements of a prosperous society. In the 1990s, alongside the apparent chance for a comprehensive peace in the Arab world that was offered after the 1993 Oslo Accords, there appeared intellectuals proposing that Israel enters a new post-Zionist phase that gives up the intense focus on public service and military preparedness, in favor of a more individualist culture and the relaxing of national identity, even to the point of applying in the future to join maybe the European Union. Such proposals were overall rejected by the conservative forces in society, but they were really destroyed by the renewed wave of Arab terror in the late 1990s and early 2000s, what is called the Second Intifada. This reassessment brought about a renewal of Zionist education with the stress of national identity and service. Moreover, the renewed terror attacks decided the long-standing debate in Israel about the future of the territories captured in the 1967 war, and especially the jihad in Samaria, in the very heart of the Jewish homeland. So Judea and Samaria are like the Jewish Kosovo, if I can read the equivalent to Kosovo in Serbian history. So in Judea and Samaria, the originally small population that had been ethnically cleansed in 1948. So after 1948, there were no Jews in Judea and Samaria because of the war. And when we conquered it in 1967, there developed a debate if to renew Jewish settlement or leave the territory as an area for a future Palestinian state. So although de jure these territories are still contested after repeated waves of terror attacks, de facto Israeli society has begun to annex them, with ever-growing Jewish settlements that have brought the percentage of Jews living in that area from 0% in 1967 to about, one page is missing.
I'm sorry.
So I have to try to maybe
I will find it here.
Okay, I hope. You see, I have like 9 and then 11. So number 10 is not here for some reason. It should be the last one. Or the one before that. Yeah.
I think this one.
Yeah. I have the last one. No, this one you can take. This one. Okay, but it is here, or?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Because otherwise you will have to return to translating it. So today, about 40% of the population in Judea and Samaria is Jewish, from 0 to 40%, and the Jewish population is growing more than the Arab population. So you can see that in the not too distant future, it will be 50% or maybe the majority will be Jewish. So the expectation is that in a couple of decades, the majority of the population in Judea and Samaria will be Jewish. This development was and is crucially dependent on cultural and educational efforts, which started back in 1967, but in the last decades have become part of the general Israeli culture. The settlement and renewal activities in Judea and Samaria are widely seen as the continuation and next stage of Zionist effort from the majority of the public from a century and more ago. The educational efforts in the schools, as well with private organizations, stress the central role of Judea and Samaria in Jewish history, including tours of Israeli school children in various localities of historical importance, like Herodion, Hebron, and of course the old city of Jerusalem. Various religious pilgrimages and public prayers are organized in localities of religious importance, and youth groups and organizations are active in founding and expanding hundreds of new settlements and neighborhoods, and so on. In addition, several small colleges and even a new Israeli university have been opened in Judea and Samaria areas. More broadly, the last decades have seen a clear renewal of the traditional Zionist education, putting national identity and service at the center of education and of the culture. This is especially true since Israel's unilateral withdrawal from Gaza that many hoped would bring a change, a disengagement with the Arabs of that area and open a path to a future peace, but instead it has brought increased waves of terror attacks. The tragic attack of the Hamas terrorists on villages in southern Israel on October 7, 2024 resulted in the murderous butchery of some 1,200 Israelis, mostly civilians, and the subsequent war in Gaza that is still going on. But it also exposed the extent to which the educational system has succeeded in instilling Zionist ideas in the young Israelis. The younger generation, brought up on the iPhone and the social media, confounded all predictions and stepped up to the challenge. So very small groups of Israeli young soldiers fought off masses of Hamas terrorists attacking them by surprise. Many times 50 of you, 100 attackers to every one defender. Several male and female Israeli soldiers died fighting rather than surrender to the attackers. Others successfully repelled the attacks of the terrorists. Within hours of the terror attack, military aid units engaged with terrorists and destroyed them. Soon, they marched into Gaza, where some of them still fight undeterred. Moreover, the reserve units saw 140% attendance, with people already over age requesting to serve, and thousands coming back from abroad to serve in this war. So here we have Staff Sergeant at the Levy as one example of a young Israeli woman that died defending young recruits that she was instructive. These are the crucial results of the success of the Israeli education system in instilling and fostering a clear, strong national identity in Israelis. Thank you very much.
Hvala. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ja da krenem samo sa malom ilustracijom, poznajem kod prijatelja profesora sa Princetona, vrlo ozbiljna, koji se bavi političkom teorijom i političkom filozofijom, koji se odmah uputio, zadužio opremu i uključio se u borbu. Dakle, to zaista se odnosi ne samo na ljudi iz tog prostora, nego bukvalno i na najuglednije njihove, ajde kažemo, naučnike koji su u svetu i koji su odmah krenuli nazad. I'm speaking about, I think you will recall the young gentleman, professor of political theory from Princeton, who immediately, I met him at one of the course, who immediately they went to the airport and went to Israeli Defense Forces, took the arms and went. So I'm saying that it's not only about the ordinary people and some people who are professors at very prestigious universities and able to fight decidedly, they can help.
And he's probably like 40 or something, so he's older, like 30 or 40.
Yeah. Dakle, čovjek koji ima preko 40 godina. Izvolite, dakle, ovo je bilo jedno, ajde kažemo, onako vrlo sažeto, ali vrlo precizno predavanje koje je davalo onako različite aspekte i ja verujem da će biti u debati još mogućnosti da dodatno istražimo pitanje i tako dalje. Profesor Despotović, izvolite.
Da se zahvalim profesoru na sadržajnom i informativnom predavanju i želio bih da postavim sljedeće pitanje. Dakle, da li je cionistički pokret u dosadašnjem njegovom radu na izgradnji nacije, da li je preko jezika, kulturne tradicije koja je pratila čitav taj proces, sistema obrazovanja i formiranje države Izraela uspio da završi proces izgradnje nacije, ili je taj proces još uvijek ostao otvoren, s obzirom na činjenicu da je više vekovno izgnanstvo jevrijskog naroda diljem zemaljskog šara, a pogotovo Europe i Amerike, stvorilo čitav niz podela unutar jevrijske populacije, koje nisu samo jezičke i kulturološke, nego i političke i tako dalje, religijske i tako dalje. I da li je i kako cionistički pokret rešavao i rešava te probleme koji i danas stoje. Ne bih da ilustrujem na primjerima tih podela, znamo mi o čemu se radi, ali me zaista zanima kako cionistički pokret i danas uspeva da premoštava te razlike koje se ne mogu izgraditi samo preko ovih klasičnih mehanizama koji podrazumijevaju jezik, kulturu, obrazovanje i nacionalnu državu.
So, Professor Despotović wanted to thank you very much for your very precise data and focused lecture. In his lecture, his question is actually if Zionist movement has succeeded through language, culture, system education and state to, let me say, more or less finish the process of the nation building with the Jews and Israelis, or you could say that it is still ongoing and long-lasting project, having in mind still the big differences that are existing in a way even culturally, ideologically, politically among the Jews in the world, or maybe Jews from Israel with European, American, and so on, having in mind actually that, as you said, different groups of Jews have been living in very different environments, different traditions, even different languages, and so on.
So, what I say is that it would look fair to give you an answer, and then you answer it, or ask like a few sentences?
A few sentences are okay, so
So I would say that certainly the process isn't finished.
The process naravno još nije završen.
For two reasons.
Iz dva razloga.
The first is that effectively today only about 50% of Jews live in Israel.
Za početak, danas samo 50% Jevreja živi u državi Izraela, 50% je van.
So the Zionist goal is still to have as many Jews as possible to come back to their homeland. Maybe not 100%, but 70-80%.
A naravno, cilj cionističkog pokreta je da proba da što veći broj tih ljudi dovede. Ako ne 100%, ali recimo 70, 80, možda 90% ljudi.
So this is one side. The other aspect is that for various obvious reasons, the Jewish identity in the diaspora is becoming weaker. That's the opposite of what is happening in Israel, where the new identity is actually getting stronger all the time, because of the natural processing all over the world of Jews becoming more secular like their societies. So most of them are living Jewish communities and Jewish life, so their Jewish identity is becoming weaker.
So, drugi deo problema je naravno to što, kad govorimo o tih 90% Jevreja koji su ostali da žive širom sveta, njihov, suprotno Jevrejima koji žive u Izraelu i čiji identitet, kao što vidimo, postaje sve jači i sve više vezan za ono što čini osnove jevrejskog i izraelskog identiteta, u dijaspori obratni proces, generalno on kaže da se smanjuje nivo vezanosti za tradiciju, za religiju i za uopšte pripadnost jevrejskoj zajednici.
So, today there is a very deep cultural, even sociological divide between Jewish Israelis and diaspora Israelis. For example, I give you one example. The Israeli woman, in the average, she had 4 kids. But the Jewish woman in the world has even fewer kids than the society where they, so in America, if now it's like 1.8, the Jewish woman has 1.2. So it's even more extreme than the general population, so you see this divergence.
Evo konkretnog primjera, dakle, šta cionističko izraelsko obrazovanje radi u pogledu broja fertiliteta i rađanja dece, što je posljedica obrazovanja i vrednostnog i religioznog i tako dalje. Dakle, u samom Izraelu jevrejska žena prosečno rađa skoro 4 dece, mislim da je stopa fertiliteta negde preko 3, što je zapanjujuće za nas, ali on pominja, dakle, recimo očekuje oko 4 dece rodi, a u Sjedinjenim državama, u jevrejskoj zajednici, to je još niži stepen fertiliteta 1,2, nego što je uobičajeno za čitav SAD, koji recimo, ne znam, negde preko 1,5, 1,6, verovatno sigurno ispod 2 u svakom slučaju.
So, this is a process that is going on in many countries, but for the Jewish communities, it means that many Jewish communities, especially the smaller ones, will disappear probably within the next generation. So just to illustrate, there are about half Jews in the world in Israel and half in the rest of the world, but the number of Jewish children being born is 2 children are every year, 2 out of 3 are born in Israel and 1 is born. So clearly within one generation, not only the general population of Jews will shrink, but in many countries where there are few, there will not want to be committed. And I and many Israelis believe that this is the challenge for those Jews in the diaspora, either bringing to Israel, but not all of them will come. So we have to use Israel somehow to strengthen the Jewish identity, or we will lose millions, to assimilation.
Okay. Dakle, veliki problem je što u dijaspori, zbog tog sistema vrednosti, ja ne kažem koji se predstavlja iz globalne strukture i procesa, te male jevrejske zajednice su na putu nestajanja. Dakle, njihova stopa fertiliteta i rađanja je naravno mnogo manja nego u Izraelu. I on kaže, blizu, znači 50% Jevreja živi u Izraelu, a 50% u dijaspori. Međutim, 2 deteta od 3 se rode u Izraelu, a 1 u dijaspori. I problem je dakle što, kaže, država Izrael gleda sad to kao potencijalni ozbiljan zadatak, s jedne strane da proba da dovede te koji još mogu da dođu, da bi uz cionističko obrazovanje, ponovo počeli da rađaju djecu i prilagodili se tamo, ili s druge strane da nađe neki način da te zajednice koje budu ostale u dijaspori obnove sistem vrednosti i počnu ponovo da rađaju djecu.
That's the answer.
Hvala za vam se profesor.
Please, thank you. Please. Izvolite. Professor Šupić.
First of all, thank you for your very interesting lecture. I had the privilege to read it in advance, so it was much easier for me to follow. Actually, I've got many questions, but I'll stick to one.
Okay.
It's a very specific question about the educational system in Israel, but I hope it won't be too specific. The essence of the question is the following. How is that identity education, patriotic education, included in school programs? There are several ways, of course. It can go through various subjects. It can be dispersed. Language, history, geography, art, music, etc. Then it could be concentrated in a specific subject, in private schools, secondary schools, etc., like patriotic education. And it also can be performed before classes, in some activities, after classes, or on holidays. Of course, it could be a combination of all. What about Israel and the educational system? Where are those that content, identity content, most included? In which way?
Yeah, so I would say. Okay.
Prevodimo.
Mogu ja?
Nema, samo pitanje ako treba nekome, ako ne treba nikome, onda nastavimo na engleskom. Možda je tako najbolje. Ili ko može biti, pa ćemo mi da prevedemo. Izvinite, sorry, just a moment.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so no need, if anyone needs some clarification, that ako nekom treba neko razjašnjenje, slobodno pitanje.
I will try to answer anyway to.
No, it's okay, people understand.
Okay. So basically, there are two elements to my answer. One is within the formal education system. It is all the system. I would say even outside of the class, more than in the class. But of course, there isn't any teaching of patriotism or something like that in a special class. But everything is very much imbued with the ideas. But even more than that, since to some level you could see it even other countries like Serbia and so on, but in Israel the Jewish religion and the Jewish national identity you cannot divide between them. So all the national holidays or festivals are connected to the national identity. So let's say that Christianity has a universal aspect, and it can have a national aspect, but in general Christianity is universal. But Judaism is very, very not universal in the sense that the main festivals are national festivals, not even religious ones. What I mean is, the main festival in the religious year is Passover, Pesach. So for the Christian, right, is the resurrection. So it's a universal thing. It's not something specific for Serbia. But for the Jews, it's the exit from Egypt, the liberation. And so the children, even in kindergarten, even in first grade, but 8th grade, every day, they come to think of the religious history of the Jews coming out of Egypt as if they are coming out of Egypt. And the same, there was a festival in Hanukkah, more or less at the time of Christmas, in the winter, that we commemorate the victories of the Maccabees over the Greeks, the Hellenes. So again, it's a religious national. So all the curriculum, but not only the curriculum, but all the extracurricular activities are imbued with the national identity. So think that, for instance, think that in Serbia you would have the school year full of commemoration, natural commemoration of the Battle of Kosovo, and then of this battle in Banja Luka in 1892. I don't know. I'm just giving you examples. So the children grow up thinking that this is. So So it's not, they are not only taught it in history school, in history lesson or religious or sociology, but it's actually everything together. And this is the, so even if you are a leftist school teacher and he says, Zionism is not really, this nationalism is not a good idea, it doesn't matter because everything else is imbued with this. So this is the first element. The second element, we have, I call it a secret, it's not a secret, but a secret educational element that is immunizing the Israeli student from what he gets in university. Because Israeli universities, Israeli universities are, I don't know about Serbia, but the majority of professors are left-leaning. Maybe not as bad as Berkeley or these crazy people, but still they are leaning. But the point is that the Israeli student at 18, he goes to the army. And he lives for 3 years in a kind of, it's not called education, but in fact, he gets educated in a kind of camaraderie and something that instills in him a kind of national identity.
National conservative values.
Exactly. So when he gets to university, one, he's older, he's 21, 22, 23, so he's less impressionable than someone who's 18. And also, exactly. And also, if the professor says, you know, militarism, blah, 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 so, I was in the army, and it's not militaristic. All the people in the class were in the army, and they're not militaristic or not militaristic, they see it as something of the national service. And so it is, in a sense, they arrive to, I'm not saying there is zero influence, but in general, I know from, I sit in the higher education council in Israel. So I meet professors, leftists, and they always cry to me. I come with the great ideas of Locke, Derrida, and Marx, and they don't care about it. They hear, they study, but they don't, most of the students don't care about it, what they say. Our life are not reflected in this, what we are talking about, sociology and the construction and work and all this. They don't, so the students have become immunized out of their school years and the military. So that's it there.
Thank you.
It's crucial. It's okay, we are starting with 75 days and eventually we will reach 3 years.
And the national reader.
No, I'm Jovica Pavlović.
Okay, thank you very much.
But everyone followed my answer.
Yeah, no,
Understand?
no, of course, I ask if anyone needs
okay.
translation or
Okay,
information, you can do that, so
Okay.
we'll continue.
Great.
Thank you very much for your lecture. I will have 2 questions. Feel free to answer either one or both based on the time that we have.
We have
The first one is related to how this educational system approaches Israeli minorities, and not only speaking about the Palestinian Muslim minority, but you also have I believe in English it's Shirkazi, the Muslim minority from the Caucasus, and who are essentially integrated in the Israeli nation, but they're not ethnically Jewish or
Yes.
Israeli. So how are they, is there a special approach of the educational system to integrate them, but to also acknowledge their cultural background difference, or is it just simply like the French model that we mentioned so much in our virtual conversation? You're Israeli, end of story, and you also learn about the Jewish exit from Egypt and so on. The second question is more abstract, and it would be about the organizational model of the state of Israel, and which is, let's say in European terms, a classical 19th century model of, strong state, strong army, strong educational system, nationally oriented, which at least in Western Europe, in theory, but in Eastern Europe in practice, is viewed and applied as a model of the past, which essentially brings about conflict and this whole post-World War II narrative that we cannot have such states in Europe because essentially they would just struggle for power and it would escalate to another war. So I would just like you to reflect on this, whether there's such narrative in Israel in comparison to the Arab states around, because it is evident that such Israeli model, of course, is very confronted to the states around Israel, especially nowadays Iran. So just to get a reflection on that. Thank you.
So, about the education of minorities, very briefly, I would say that everyone in the school system that is funded by the state, because again, you could opt out, and some small groups opt out totally, and let's say the Orthodox Church has its own school, and it doesn't get almost any money from the state, and it teaches what it does teach, that is possible. But most schools want to get money from the state, so in that case they have to follow the curriculum, but there is like the main curriculum where even if you're Druze or Muslim, you study about the history of the Jews, but you have like additional hours where you study your own tradition, and you may study in another language, like the Arabs in Israel study Arabic, although they might study about the exodus of the Jews from Egypt. However, of course vacation and religious, that they do not have vacation, for instance, on Saturday, but if it's a Christian school, it will be Sunday, of course. And also they know about the Jewish holidays, but they have vacation in Christmas, not during the Hanukkah. So that is different. But they grow up knowing the story, and in general, all the communities that are not Arab Muslim, so Druze, Christian, and also Circassians, who are Muslim but not Arab, are very much integrated socially and economically, and most of them actually serve in the army. Circassians and Druze have requested and received, they have to serve in the army. The Christian Arabs it's not required, but many of them volunteer. So, even among the Muslim Arabs, there is a growing groups. Some of them have a problem with fighting, so we have like a kind of national service that you don't have to be a soldier. You can go to in a school or something, but the idea of national service is still there very strong. So this is for the educational system. About the organization of the state, so this is by chance we have the translator here of a book on the virtue of nationalism. So basically, historically there is an argument that national states or national identity in a strong state is the engine of war. This is what causes wars. And the opposite argument is the opposite, that actually imperialistic ambitions are what causes wars. And empires and their destruction is what causes wars. So, according to a narrative that is very strong in the European Union, the First and Second World War were created by nationalism. But my view, and most nationalists say, they were created by imperialism. Because empires like Austro-Hungary and Russia wanted to unite their empire, and the nations want to be free. And this is what caused the war, not the self-determination idea. And the same with the Second World War. I mean, some people say that Nazism is an extreme nationalism, but in fact, it wasn't nationalism at all, because it had some idea of racial theory. It wanted to conquer all of Eastern Europe, and even areas it didn't conquer, it wanted Italy to create a zone, and it wanted to have racial, so it was an imperialist idea. It wasn't a national. Hitler never said, these are the borders of Germany, and this is my border, and that's it. He never said that. He said that we have to go ever eastward. So this is not a nationalist idea. It's a kind of expansionism or something like that. So again, it's a theoretical argument, but I agree that the argument at the basis of the European Union now is that nation states are bad, and the best idea would be for the nations to become slowly dissolving, maybe becoming like cantons, and the European Union being supreme over all. So if people think that Bosnia is a good model for all of Europe, that will happen. There will be some German chancellor, and the states will be weak, but I think that most people in Europe don't like that idea. Actually, it's my impression. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But also you understand that this model also says that since the state and national identity is not a good thing, so aside from the different national identities, even dissolving the national identity of your own state by mass immigration is not a bad thing. So the EU has this idea that having millions of immigrants from Muslim or Africa or whatever is not a bad idea because national identity is bad anyway, so let's dissolve it, even irrespective of the national borders. So again, if you like this idea, it's your right to do it, but it doesn't appear that most Europeans like this idea. So what is the alternative? And I believe that the alternative is that a strong state with a strong national identity, like I don't know, Portugal or Spain. I don't think that Spain wants to conquer France. Portugal doesn't want to expand. It's a national state. It doesn't want to make war with anyone. There are situations where, of course, on the ground, the national definitions are not very clear. But I would argue that actually Israel, as a national state that gives freedom to its non-Jewish minorities, is a better model of a state than our neighboring states that are officially secular, but in fact, in every Arab state, there is a small group that crushes everyone else, and all the minorities, Kurds, Christians, Yazidis, whatever, they are destroyed or put under the thumb. Is that a good model? They are saying, no, we are a secular state, we don't have national identity, or we have a pan-Arab identity, but in fact, they are, I think, that tyrannies. So I believe that Israel, I mean, the fact is that a lot of people want to come into Israel, and we have borders, and we keep people out. And in Syria and Iraq, people are living, and what does it mean? If a place people are living, maybe they are not doing so bad, so good, and if a place people want to come in, maybe we are doing something good. So that's my view.
By the way, during the Second World War debate between royalists and the communists was like, royalists saying, if you continue like this, we will disappear at all. There will be no people because, as you know, Germans were killing 100 people for any German killed. And the communists really very assuredly insisted that it's not important who is living, we will report Chinese. So we will get people somehow. Yes, Vesna, please.
Yes,
Vesna,
when you were responding to Professor Šupić, how do you implement these Zionist ideas in the schools? I didn't hear you talk about museums, and in my experience by scholarships in Israel, I got an impression that Yad Vashem, for example, is very crucial in identity building, but not only this museum, also we visited the Herzl Museum, we visited Menachem Begin Museum, we visited Palmach Museum, and we heard in each of them that school children are coming, and I saw some of them coming on a regular basis. They take pupils to this. So I would say that Israel is very, very good in this memorial culture. And can you share some good practice with us on our museums?
Yes.
And another question, if you have time, when we were in Palmach Museum, this question is not very related, but it is. So we were talking about Haganah a lot here, and people do not know when you had the Olim Hadashim or new settlers. Not all of them share the same ideas about who your allies should be. So we have Palmach as the kosher version of guerrilla, and we have another group, Irgun, and another group, Lehi, who were more extreme. And in a sense, they are interesting to me because they sought other allies other than the Anglo-Saxon. Because we know that the British were closing Israel for quotas. So I am curious when those American elections roll, and if we get some outcome that is not favorable to Israel, and in the light of everything that's happening in Lebanon, can we expect Israel to seek other allies, maybe apart from the traditional allies?
Okay, fine. So about museums, I would say that you are correct, but I will give you go one step further, and in a sense, the educational view of Israel is that all the country is a museum. What I mean is that all the museums that you have to add the many historical sites, like the Masada, the Kotel, Hebron. So the Israeli student is really, through his 12 years in the school, is really taken to these museums, but also to these historical sites. Some of them are archaeological, some of them are new. But all this structure is like the cherry on the cake, because the children in Israel are not taught about the Holocaust in the Yad Vashem. They are, every year there is a commemoration and they are taught in school, so when they come to Yad Vashem, it's not a new experience, it's a kind of, it's a closure of all the education they get. They see it, in a sense physically. But it's not that, it's not like a tourist that comes from Japan and says, oh, I didn't know this or something like that, or even knew it, but so all the educational system in Israel would be takes the students to places where the Maccabean wars were, or Hebron, or areas in Jerusalem that they study about in geography, in the Bible, in the history lessons, or whatever. So it becomes like, again, for, let's say, think that all the students in Serbia would go to some areas in Kosovo to learn about their history, right? So, yeah, the trip. So 1 year is in Kosovo, another, let's say, in Vojvodina, in some important place, maybe...
To Jasenovac as well, that's very important.
Yes. By the way, you could also say that in Israel, some of these trips are to Judea and Samaria, which are not formally in Israel. So you could say that maybe you should have trips of these Serbian students to the Republika Srpska to see what because you can teach everything in the school, but it's different if the kids go 2 or 3 days and he stays and he sees the people and he understands. And if you have a map of Serbia, I understand, but when you are in Banja Luka and you see the things, you think differently about it. So in the same, we studied about Masada, which was the fortress where the last, but it's very different when you go and it's planned that you go and you sleep at night near Masada, and then they wake you up at 4 o'clock and you start to walk up, and then as the sun comes up, suddenly, you are walking in the darkness and the sun comes up and you see it, so it's planned to become an emotional experience. It's not like, I saw Masada, 2 buildings here, two stones, but it's, and they read the section from history where this battle was here, what happened, so it becomes, in a sense, it's not history, because the student says, I am part of the story. This person, his name is like my name. He died here. It's like something that connects me in a deeper level. So this is why I mean that the museums and the archaeological sites and historical sites are part of the educational system. They are not like separate. I go to see a museum. Like you could say a museum of art, but the historical museums are actually part of the education. About the island of Israel, so the basic theory of Zionism is, let's say, the political and international arena. It's always on 2 pillars. One is self-reliance, meaning no one will ever, we cannot, the idea of Zionism, no one will fight for us. So we will never ask some other army to fight us unless we fight also. So originally, when Herzl started the movement, he tried with to basically, so the pillar one is self-reliance, and secondly is find some great power that will be allowed with you. So historically, we always look for one great power, not necessarily the greatest power, but one great power that will be allowed with. So Herzl, during the years when he started Zionism, he met with the German Kaiser, he met with the Russian Prime Minister, he met with the Sultan, and he met with the British Prime Minister. So he tried, he didn't have any precondition. For him, if the Kaiser would have said, yeah, I'm willing to be the patron of the Zionist movement, he thought correctly that for various geopolitical reasons, the British would be the best allies. But he didn't say, yeah, the British are the only ones. If the Russians would have said, yes, we can use the Jews to further our interest in the Middle East, maybe the history would have been different. But de facto, and then later, people don't know that, in fact, after 1948, Israel was not allied with America or Britain. In fact, in 1948, we had a clash with Britain. So during our first, let's say, 20 years, the main international ally of Israel was France. And for instance, we were allied with France in the 1957 war, in the Suez War. All the tanks and airplanes of Israel came from France, not from America, not from Britain, but from Russia, because it was the Soviet Union was, let's say, in 1948, the Soviet Union also helped us. They hoped that Israel was ruled by socialists. They thought that we would become communists, but they didn't. So after in the Korean War, we decided to go with the Western powers. But America was very, I would say, not cooperative with Israel until 1968. The Americans basically believed that Israel is not strong enough to invest in it. And the French, because they had a conflict with the Arab world, unconnected with Israel, they are Nigeria, right? So because they were fighting anyway, they saw Israel as the only ally that can help them against the Arabs. So they were like, but after the war in Nigeria finished, about 1962, and De Gaulle came to power and he reoriented the foreign policy of France toward the Arab world, and basically France stopped being the ally of Israel, and then we succeeded in developing the American alliance. Now, we are aware that currently I would say there are two elements with the US. One is that US power is in relative decline. I mean, it doesn't matter this year or next year, but in general, it was certainly, let's say 1990 or 2000, it was the only superpower. Now it's still the most powerful, no question about it, but let's say China and other powers are becoming more stronger. Now, there is a natural affinity in Israelis for democracies and Western. So it's not that Israel can really say we'll be allies of China, and China anyway won't want to be allies. But clearly, I mean, unfortunately, America is still, I mean, the public opinion, even under Biden and if Harris wins, even under a Democratic administration, the US is still closer in many ways to Israel than the European Union, for instance, or European countries. So the options are limited, although some Israelis are starting to talk about creating some kind of alliance with India, because, for instance, now there are talks about having an embargo of some bombs and armaments from the US and from Europe to Israel. And so, for instance, not necessarily because of conflict, but because you know that the West has used all these artillery shells in Ukraine. So they don't have anything for Israel. So maybe you know that we bought the shells from Serbia. We are buying arms from Serbia because no one has arms. But more in the long term, Israel is developing avenues like India, maybe Serbia, maybe other countries, because it might have a conflict tomorrow with Syria, let's say, and maybe America will say, no, we're not giving you the munitions, so we have to find it somewhere.
My observations and remarks are related to the previous question, because we spoke in the car about, when we were coming in Novi Sad, we spoke about liberalism also, I think, maybe in the Srpska Kamenica, and liberalism, extreme liberalism leads to nihilism, because you have this glorification of LGBT ideology, feminist ideology, and finally you don't have people, you don't have it. It's no way treat. But in the other hand, you can see now that nationalism, but Professor Avery explained something else, but nationalism leads to war. And you are in danger to lose some people and maybe lose territories and maybe lose your state. It can happen also. In that point of view, all the political theories don't have any sense. Because in any case, you will disappear if you choose extreme liberalism, if you choose extreme nationalism. And Professor Avery very well explained that it's not problem. The problem is not nationalism, but extreme imperialism. Yes, but in fact, if you look at the European history, the French people doesn't hate before the First War Germany because of the German imperialism, in reality, because they took them territories. They took them out their territories, Alsace and Lorraine, and the whole story was, we must give back our territories. That's the main. In the schools, they learn in the elementary schools. We must come back in Alsace and Lorraine. It's our national goal. I mean, I don't want to say nothing. I mean, but I want to open maybe this sort of discussion and thinking about that.
Okay, so my own answer would be that actually I believe that the problem, many of the problems in Europe between nations, maybe most of them, were actually rooted in non-nationalistic issues and mainly in imperialistic issues. Because remember that the modern French state and the modern German state were not exactly born as nation states. Because the modern French states were theoretically born in the French Revolution. But the French Revolution was very, very imperialistic. Even before Napoleon, it started to conquer the Netherlands and other areas, and everywhere it made a republic, but it wasn't a republic, it was a protectorate. And then when under Napoleon, it liberated all of Europe. But what does it mean, liberation? It means that in Spain, his brother is king, and in Australia, another brother, and in Italy, his brother-in-law, something like that. And he created a French empire. He was an emperor, in which all the states were theoretically independent, but in fact wasn't. And then, so yeah, it was an imperialist attempt, and the same with the various German states, which were engulfed in a nationalist union of Germany that was also mixed with imperialistic ambitions. Because, for one, as I said, not in all cases the national delineations between people are very clear. And also because even nations that have no territorial quarrel still doesn't mean that they like each other. I give you one example. If you go to Britain and you travel to Edinburgh and you see someone on the street and you say, "Are you English?" You look like you studied in Ireland. "No, I'm Scottish." What do you mean? You are living in the same country for 300 years. The same language and the same religion or non-religion, because it's almost the same. No, we are totally different. So what I mean is, you understand what I'm saying. I'm saying is that many times the question of Alsace-Lorraine could have been solved by many means, but it was created by the maybe unnecessary war of the Second French Empire, where Napoleon III thought that he should be like maybe he should be or try to be like his uncle and also be a conqueror, and it wasn't very successful. But why wasn't this war in 1870? Really, it wasn't for Alsace-Lorraine, because the French already had Alsace-Lorraine. So they lost the war with an empire that they didn't want to create. So it's more complicated. I think it's more complicated. Of course, anyone can have an opinion.
Okay, more? Yeah, please. Dušan and then you. Okay, please.
Pa, da podvučem sličnosti i razlike između onog što ste rekli, teritorije ljude koje je, postoji neka analogija sa Kosovom. Sličnosti u tomu što se niko nije bojao i Jevrejima ni Srba, da ih napadne, da sve te pogrome i holokaust. Nismo mogli zamisliti da Jevreji nekako uzvrate. A tako bilo isto sa Srbima, na primjer, baš Albanci, oni što su pridružili Srbima koji su prosveđani Turci, kad su kroz te sve procese najzad otišli, imali smo onda posle toga problema s njima, to je još Rade Domanović spomenuo, znate, pre više 100 godina, pa onda posle Drugog svjetskog rata neki se pronašao podatak da su ulaganja, ne ulaganja, nego baš pokloni, Albaniji bili otprilike visini našeg duga, spoljnog duga.
Samo je to računa, ja moram da prevedem to nekako i ako ima pitanje da na to se koncentrišemo.
Da, pa eto što sam htjela da kažem, naši neprijatelji su uvijek bili sigurni da im nećemo uzvratiti. To je važno za Jevreje i za Srbe. Međutim, postoji jedna sličnost i uzroku svega toga. Evo, ovih gospodin je spomenuo liberalizam i kuda to vodi. Kod nas je to bilo do toga da imamo najviše abortusa po glavi stanovnika u Srbiji i Albanci, kao što znate, oni vjerojatno ih uopšte ne znaju, vjerojatno ih nisu izabrani.
Promenilo se kod njih i to je tam napreduje od 99. na ovamo, tamo je zacarilo to sve što ranije nisu imali, sad ima sve.
U svakom slučaju kod nas se nije stalo sa tim. Kod Jevreja ima da je propust to što se oni ne pozivaju na svoje biblijsko pravo, ne na istorijsko pravo, na biblijsko pravo, to je jedini narod kome je sam Bog odredio teritoriju.
Nema pitanja, nego sam...
To je sve, mislim, komentar.
She mostly got comments and trying to compare our and Jewish history, and she said actually that generally through the history Jews and Serbs were not retaliated. That generally it was treated that you can do whatever you do to them, something like that's only his argument actually. So she made the analogy up to that, and in that sense that we should have some resolution to be able to retreat and to defend ourselves and to fight and so on. Also, she gave a comment about the liberalism and very, destructive consequences in this kind of, especially for natality. Already Professor mentioned that, but she mentioned abortion especially, and the fact that really in Serbia we probably have one of the biggest rates of abortion in Europe, and the problem is that we don't have precise data because usually lots of private clinics in which abortion has been performed are not all that they officially are, but de facto nobody asked for them to give great data. So she didn't have the question, more comments about them. So.
Sam nisam završila, htjela sam da pitam za komentar, jer nisam primetila da se Jevreji ikad pozivaju na biblijsko pravo na teritoriju. Možda i moj propust.
Okay. And she asked about how is, when you speak about the settlements or regaining your territory, is it based on Bible's agreement, Bible's argument, if I could say, of possession, or what is the basis of legitimizing these moves?
So yeah, as I said before, Israel's relationship to the Bible is a bit different than most countries, because for someone in France or Serbia or the US, when he talks about the Bible, it's like he's talking about a universal book that he takes from it his own idea, let's say. It's like if you're religious, you can use it, but if you're not religious, you treat it like Plato or Aristotle. You say, I'm Aristotelian, you can be Aristotelian. But for in the Jewish national consciousness and identity, the Bible is religious, but it's also historical. So the point is that most Israelis, secular, even an atheist Israeli, he thinks that the Bible historically proves that his own nation was there. So it's not like, he's not taking the Bible and saying, God says that it's my country. He says, the Bible is proving that my name is Jonathan, and someone named Jonathan lived there, and so on and so forth. And so that is, the biblical argument is not necessarily, it can be, but it's not necessarily a religious space. So I would say that most Israelis use the Bible not in the religious sense, as they say God gave us the land, but say the Bible proves that our roots are historically there for 2,000-3,000 years.
In combination with archaeology.
Of course, but she asked about the Bible, there are many other...
Okay,
Dušan,
ja ću da postavim pitanje na srpskom, lakše će mi da se izrazim. Neće mi problem preveći. Imamo tu par sličnih paralela, razgovarat ćemo možda kasnije nekada o tome, oko stvaranja palestinske nacije i stvaranja bošnjačke nacije. Ono što je kasnije postalo zajedničko, to je da su muslimanska braća postala dominantna i u palestinskoj naciji i ovamo kasnije među muslimanima u Bosni i Hercegovini koji su 93. i formalno postali bošnjačka nacija.
So he says, of course, that there will be the chance in the future to exchange about many historical things and ethnic political issues that are being happening there. So he mentioned actually that there are some parallels that we have in creation of the so-called Palestinian and Muslim nation, and especially mentioned the role of Muslim Brotherhood, which slowly was regaining more and more important place among both of the groups, and it's interesting the whole history of the so-called Bosnian nation, which eventually in '93, they for the first time organized the Congress because they started war in '92 as Muslims with the began of General Ulema, Luna, and not as Bosnians. They then organized in '93 the Congress in which they defined that they are Bosnians.
Can I just say something? But the roots, it doesn't go only to the, I think that the connection is not only the Muslim Brotherhood, because in the 1940s, the Mufti of Jerusalem, right, came to Germany, including here, and they organized this Muslim Legion, especially uniting in this idea of fighting essentially Judaism and Christianity and so on.
Da, pisao sam ja o tome u izraelskim medijima, neke intervjue, da poslušam kasnije. Pojenta je u ovom da skratim. Stranka demokratske akcije, glavna muslimanska stranka u Bosni i Hercegovini, stvari je osnovana od strane panislamističke strukture muslimanske braće. I njihove strukture muslimanske braće od 1936. godine koje su iz Al-Azhara došli, vratili se, tamo su studirali ovi bosanski muslimani, i vratili se i tada su oni zajedno sa velikim muftijom pravili 10 Handžar diviziju. Pojenta je ovo, 90-ih oni osnivaju SDA, osnivaju svoje radikalno krilo Patriotsku ligu i Zelene beretke i to postaje kasnije takozvana armija BiH. Mi dolazimo u situaciju da muslimanska braća imaju u Evropi svoju dio svoje države i svoju vojsku.
Dakle, on kaže bavio s time također i pisao, o tome čak i izraz.
Može na engleskom.
Sorry, I
have a saying.
I went to Hebrew. Joking, okay. So what he's saying is that actually he knows, of course, if he wrote about that and also wrote about that in Israel, maybe he might send you some of those things which were published after that, but his is very much actually on these traditional connections with Muslim Brotherhood, which de facto was very much behind the creating of the Stranka Demokratske Akcije, or the Party of Democratic Action, which was Muslim party in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which had strong pan-Islamic and Muslim Brotherhood basis behind that. And as well, they established so-called Patriotic League as the basis, which was radical part of the party structure, and then it turned into army of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Tako da smo imali situaciju 90-ih da je, zahvaljujući američko-iranskoj saradnji i ovim panislamističkoj strukturi muslimanske braće u Sarajevu, protiv Srba, muslimanskom dijelu Sarajeva, protiv Srba su ratovali i Hezbollah i Hamas. Kao jedino još, znači, sem Izraela, to je bilo ovam slučaju.
So actually, somehow it came up, but the whole structure was eventually finishing with due to strange American-Iranian cooperation on the field in Sarajevo and this part of Bosnia at that time. You had Hezbollah, Hamas, Mujahideen, all the kinds of radical Islam fighters from all over the world fighting with Serbs.
Izvinjam se na ovom dužem uvodu pitanja. Imamo u principu istog protivnika. Politički islam, konkretno muslimansku braću. I mi u Bosni i Hercegovini. Srbija još u jednom mjeri možda nije svjesna toga, ali doći će to na red. I ljudi i vi u Izraelu. I trenutno ratujete protiv muslimanske braće, to je Hamasa, i čini mi se da gubite medijski rat. Mi znamo iz naše iskustva u ratu da su strukture muslimanske braće SDA, njihova armija BiH koristili svoje civile, pucali na nas iz artiljerije sa bolnica, porodilišta, vrtića, škola. Naravno, po prirodi stvari suprotna ili napadnuta artiljerija vraća na mjesto dakle su napadnuti. I to je sve snimano i išlo u svijet. Imate sličnu situaciju, pokušavate se boriti. Ono što mene brine, da vi, koji ste ipak mnogo izverziraniji i prisutniji u globalnim medijima, gubite na jedan način medijski rat, jer vaš imidž je uzdrman u svijetu i mene interesuje kako planirate da to riješite, jer to i nama treba. Hvala.
So, this he of course insisted very much in his parallel, the same experience, and concerning what is really happening now, and especially the way it is presented in media, his qualification is that in a way Israel is losing media war. Generally, the situation is that the picture of Israelis is becoming more, they're horrible, they're killing civilians and so on. So we know that because we have the same experience in the field, in which of course Muslim Brotherhood taught them to use the put their artillery among the civilians in schools, in hospitals, everywhere. So of course, if you are attacked, then you cannot do anything but retaliate to that. And he said the question is, first, would you agree with this qualification about losing the media war? Although Jews, of course, have much better media position than Serbs who have in the 90s and so on, but still his question is, what do you plan to do about, at least reducing the damage that is happening in global media concerning the Israeli brutality, as they call it, and so on.
I mean, if I may add, why I'm asking, because we Serbs are very well known as the worst ones in the PR in the world, and you are much better than us. So I would like to hear something that tells us as well.
Well, I would say that there is a very clear, I would say, limit to the meaning of losing or winning a media war, because unlike what appears, in many cases, there is a lot of lobbying activities that go beyond the. So I will give you one example that you all know, but just to say that, let's say that Putin has lost the media war about Ukraine, but if Hungary thinks that it's not its interest to be conflictual, then it doesn't matter what the media thinks, right? So what I'm saying is that, in many cases, states make very realistic considerations, not really caring about the media. So you have to take into consideration that sometimes someone might lose the media war and still not lose the war. But I would say that more than that, we are entering in the last 2 decades, but now we see it, a new era of media, a new media reality. Because until 2000, maybe 2010, most of the media meant, I don't know, 50, 100 television stations, some newspapers, and this is the media war. So let's say that in this channel, let's say the BBC or CNN, doesn't matter, someone that is for Hamas appeared, then you want someone else. So sometimes you are less sensitive, but in general, the field is constrained and you can see it. The problem is that in the last generation, the new social media has grown, which has very different rules. The effects are very different, and the reality is very different. For example, in the last 2 or 3 years, real pro-Nazi discussions have become normalized in, on Facebook and X. You have people more or less saying, yeah, Hitler was right, blah, 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 which is an effect of the social media. Because until a few years ago, if someone wanted to say that, he couldn't say it in the BBC, he couldn't say it in the national newspaper, so he would have to find some small place where he said it and no one reads. He has like a magazine of 300 people, but now on the net, one, he can reach a lot of people, and secondly, there is a premium on provocation. So, for instance, you have all these, it's called Pallywood, like Hollywood, Palestinian Hollywood. So you have a lot of films showing fake massacres, fake facts. You have, now in the last few days, you have a Palestinian father with his kid, dead kid, he's holding it and crying, oh my God, Israel has killed his kid, and then you see that the kid is moving the legs. So he's not dead.
I saw it.
Exactly, so...
We could tell you quite a lot about that from 90s, or
Exactly.
about social networks.
So
Same ops on the
Opus modernity.
modern.
exactly. So, but you see the, let's say that someone like you or me see something, even if the kid's legs doesn't move, we use some kind of discernment saying, maybe he's right, maybe he's not right, what are the circumstances, let's look at it. And by the way, even in a just war, kids die. It's not a reason to say, I'm very sorry, but if it's always sorry. But I would say that many millions of people have no discernment ability, many young people, so in campuses, they became enraged about, so this is a kind of media war that I think that the world is only now learning how to conduct. And basically, you have to have an army of young people sitting in their home and creating counter-propaganda against the others, because you are in a constant 24 hours, and it doesn't matter at all what the activity is on. So there was this narrative of a genocide, which I don't know if you see, but it stopped at this point, because the facts are not there. No one, even at the, even all the biased people at the court cannot prove that there is a genocide, because there isn't a genocide. So at a certain point, they don't, they don't have the, so they switch to human interest. So from genocide is Israel wants to kill 1 million people. Then when it doesn't happen, they move to Israel is killing babies, Israel is bombing
Completely
schools.
same, like
Exactly. So, but this also has, you know, the media has a kind of fatigue, and now something they're talking about Lebanon, no one cares about Gaza. You know, something to say. So maybe tomorrow there will be a new Ukrainian attack in Kursk or Russian attacks, and something on the world will cover.
Yeah. Since we've been working almost for 2 hours, I will use the opportunity to end it up. Eventually, this is really finishing of the formal part. Professor Haile will still be tomorrow in Belgrade, then leave tomorrow evening. And we really got to quite an interesting, very focused, very detailed lectures, which I think gave us quite a lot of new things, but then again opens up theoretical stuff and so on. And let me slowly finish. First of all, one comment and 2 questions I would like to pose. Concerning that, again, returning back, both of us are political thinkers in that sense, political theorists. It's so interesting to see how the ideas travel and how it was fantastic to listen, you know, about the Rabbi. I didn't know that already in 43 he published the book with the whole idea. And also, like you're coming from Sarajevo, which used to be very important Serbian town with a wealthy merchants, with some fantastic intellectual tradition that disappeared very much in that sense. But I'm mentioning that because exactly for us, the history of the self-organization of Serbs, mostly in Bosnia, Herzegovina, Dalmatia, those were parts where we had this very strong diaspora, especially in the diaspora. I'm referring to what you used, but actually there were people who were living there.
They were living outside of the
outside, and in that sense, we had, I think, one of the best traditions. Jovan Dušanić is publishing some friend of ours, economist, actually, who's from the areas from Lukan, who wrote some fantastic books about self-organization of the Serbs in culture, and especially it boomed before the First World War. Also, in this part, we spoke more in sense of currency. Today, we spoke about the importance of self-organization, of course, together with church, which was also being combined in Bosnia and Herzegovina at that time, also Hungary. And also, we had the fantastic experience of self-organizing in Ottoman Empire in the late 19th, beginning of 20th century. The park that is at the Dior Hotel is having some famous Vojvoda Vuk, or the Duke Vuk, who is showing to the Savo, actually, and he was very famous freedom fighter of the Serbs who were having this combination, especially at these Ottoman parts, of educational, religious, self-education, and also fighting something like Hanukkah and so on. So why I'm mentioning that? Because with Yugoslavia and with communism, we completely lost this tradition, and unfortunately, very much of what we have today is that people got used to wait from the state to do something instead of regaining, returning to this noble and fantastic tradition of self-organizing. I could speak quite a lot about that, but it would be interesting for you also. A friend of ours, Alexander Rakovic, wrote a book, it was his MA magisterium at that time, about the Irish Revolution. That was a very interesting story, because Irish revolutionaries were coming to Serbia to learn about our experience of self-organizing, making the riots, and then we have Croats from Yugoslavia going to Ireland, learning their experience, and returning back to implement that against the Serbs and the Yugoslavians. So it's very interesting to be studying about what was happening with ideas. I will finish with two questions, however. The first, of course, for us very important is demography. Israel is the only case in recent history, I think, in which you have this combination of fantastic education and very big still fertility rate. I think Argentina used used to have that still until, but I think it's declining because they are getting a lot of feminism and LGBT, transgender, whatever they are. But Israel is still having that. So, and of course for us who are having demographic problems, especially Republika Srpska, which has the most, the least populated area officially at the Balkans, it's very important. So how would you describe actually, what is it? Is it religion? Is it 3 years of military service, learning that you have duties and not only, I don't know, rights? Or is it, I don't know, idea of being in danger and surrounded with the enemy, so you have to, you know, return back? How is it possible to have this combination of higher education and big fertility rate? That's the first question. And the second one, I mean, we have quite a lot of things, but going back to digitalization world and social networks and everything that is going on, how do you defend your kids from that? Because it's becoming the biggest problem. By the way, one of the tasks general, and it was very important that Mr. Pavlovich and his colleagues are doing, fighting for the mental health. I mean, the issue of the mental health in different ways, like, you know, betting system, narcomancy and so on, but especially, you know, there are more and more kids all around, and even in our area, wherever you're having the problem with, you know, being dependent what's the word addicted actually to the games and so on. That does the country or the religious community who is, you know, leading the job, and how successful you are in that.
So about the demography, I would say that there are some elements that are unique and some elements that are peculiar. Because clearly there are elements in Jewish religion and national identity that help the high fertility. So Jewish all over the world, the more someone is observant, the more children he has. So the ultra-Orthodox are clearly in Israel and abroad, but they are an outlier, because in Israel, even the secular, let's say you go to a professor at university, it's very common for her to have 3 or 4 kids. The ultra-Orthodox have said something, would have 7, 8, 9 kids, but the regular people, I would say the average is among Jews is between 3 and 4, because the Arabs have a lower fertility now. So I would say that the elements are, some of them are in the, I would say, the peculiar place of the family in the Jewish religious and national identity. And what I mentioned before, that the national religious identity is very, but what I want to explain is that most people think that like the center of religious life in Christianity is the church, and the center of religious life in Islam is the mosque. So the center of the religious life in Jewish religion is the synagogue, but this is not true. First of all, I want to say that probably in Christianity too, 100 years ago, Christianity was not only in the church, but you had processions, and every time you had it was all over. Now, in a sense, in the liberal state, because of the liberal vision of the state is secular, and society is secular, and the religion is like a hobby. So you like to have a beehive, this is your hobby, and I like to have butterflies, and he likes to go to church. It's a personal thing.
Yeah.
But so this is something that didn't exist in the past. It was clear that the, you know, for example, if you look at public events 100 years ago, so for instance there was some military commemoration, so the bishop was there, and it was part of their everyday life. It wasn't special. So you have to understand that in the Jewish tradition, the real center of the national religious identity is in the family, meaning that all the main festivals, the religious essence is at the home, not at the synagogue. If you're a religious Jew, you go to pray in the synagogue. But for instance, on Passover, the most important, the main thing is the Seder, meaning that you sit with your family and have a ceremonial dinner, which it blessings, and you recount the story of the Exodus. And you eat, every section you eat a special food connected to it. So it's very long, it's 3 hours. It's not like, okay, let's say a blessing 2 minutes and let's eat. It's not like that. It's very elaborate. And so every year, and it's not done in the synagogue, it's done in the home. So about 98% of Jewish homes have some kind of Seder, meaning the vast majority of secular Jews, even people who say I'm an atheist, have that. Why? Because he cannot divide between his Jewish identity and his national identity and religious. So this, you ask him, you are an atheist. Why are you telling all this biblical story to your children? He said, because this is my national identity. I cannot tell it in another way. And the same is with all the festivals of, for instance, Hanukkah, for example, or we have the Festival of Hats, which is in October. For 1 week, we built a hut, which is symbolic of the wandering in the desert, and you have to sleep at night and live in this hut that you bring near the house. So the majority of Israeli Jews do it. So you understand, this is in their home. It's not in the, they don't go to church. This is in their home. So all these, even the Hanukkah candles, you at evening you bring all your family, and I would say again, 80–90% of Israelis have every Friday the Friday evening dinner, which is not a family dinner. Everyone can have a family dinner, but it's with we start with the mother puts up 2 candles and say a prayer with the daughters, and the father says a blessing on the wine. Which again, it's a small thing, but what I want to say is this is a way that so they see the family as a center, and certainly the Holocaust and the fact that we have to fight all the time, and the fact that geographically we are a relatively small country helps this. But the effect is that the natural cohesion and almost a demand, basically being an individual that is successful in his career or his academic or whatever, is seen as incomplete if you don't have children. So I will give you 2 examples to show the extreme that this is the case in Israel. One, as in every society, it used to be the case that some women didn't marry. They remained spinsters, right? So, and in Israel, the pressure from the parents to marry, but if a woman is 37, 38, 39, she's not married, she can marry even at 60, but she will not have children. So in many religious families, they went to the rabbi and say, today the technology means that she can have artificial insemination and have a kid, but she's not married. Religiously, is it better for her to not have a kid, although she's not married, or have a kid? And the rabbi always answered, the first commandment to every living being is to have kids. So even if she doesn't, a religious woman, not a secular woman, a religious woman that she's a virgin, she never had a partner, still she is, I mean, the pressure, and the fact is that there is a very high rise in number of, again, 35, 37, 38, 40-year-old women that Israel, that, maybe I will not marry, but still I need to have a kid. And the parents, her parents tell her, we'll help you to take care of the kids. Maybe we live with us or live near, because we understand it. It's not easy for. So this is among religious women, not among secular one. The pressure is so high that even Israeli families, that their children are gay or lesbian, they pressure them and tell them, you are gay, I can like it, I don't like it, but I want grandchildren. I you are our son, and if you don't have children, we will not have grandchildren. I don't want to grow old alone, and I don't care how, but you need to have children. So sometimes a gay and a lesbian have children together, so in Israel, the gay and lesbian population has the highest number of children in the world, relatively, because the pressure from the parent is, we need the children. And you want to be a homosexual, this is your business, but our family needs the children, because otherwise it means that the Nazi have won. So the grandmother was in the Nazi concentration camp, if she doesn't have continuation. This idea is so inside the society that is even winning over the fact that some people are not married. Right? So even, as I said, religious women who do not marry, they have a high rate of children. By the way, usually not one, because it's really, in Israel, if someone says have one child, usually the friends or the aunt will say, that a single child is usually very spoiled. You need at least two. So a lot of, it's not one child. You see a woman that is still officially a virgin, she has 2 children. Because her parents said, we need to have grandchildren, I'm sorry. You cannot have, so this is the situation, just to understand the fertility way of thinking, that this is the continuity of the society.
It has, if I may add, it has something to do also with the Bible and the system of value. I mean,
yes, of course.
Bible, as you said, new life is something that is mandatory given by God.
I agree.
The point is, woman has right given by God to have children.
I agree.
It is women's highest right to have children.
I agree, but
it helps to understand the situation.
Yeah,
While we here have a situation that woman has right not to have children.
I agree, but the point I want to make is that in the Israeli society, the center of the society is not the individual. So I would say it's a pseudo-liberal society. Why pseudo-liberal? Because it has all the trappings of a liberal society: free press, free elections, you have all the rights. You can also be LGBTQ. There is no formal oppression of that. But in fact, the expectations from the individual are always as a family. So I'm not saying 0%. There are persons who say live as individual, but the point where liberalism says you are the individual and what is important is you is different. Where in Israel they say, look, you are important, but you are only part of the family, and the family needs to continue. So this switch between the individual and the collective, even if the family or the nation doesn't matter, is the point where I think the difference between other societies, because you see that even Iran or Turkey, which are, in traditional societies, the birth rate is going so down that Iran is like Serbia. Turkey is a bit more, but not a lot more. People think that Iran have 4 children. That's not true. Some countries, some Muslim countries, basically failed countries, like let's say Yemen or Afghanistan. They have maybe 8 children because. But in most Arab countries, the level is, let's say, like Europe 20 years ago. They have maybe 3 children. It's like 2.1, 2.2. Yeah. Okay, so Egypt a bit more. But anyway, they used to have like 8 children. It's not the case. And many of them, Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, Iran, many others, are either at replacement or below replacement level. So, for Europeans at least, some of them are happy because it means that there won't be so many coming. But what I'm saying that, again, all the societies have not found a way to counter the liberal emphasis. It's a good emphasis to say that the individual has to look for his own self-realization. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that the individual should think about himself. The issue is he the center of the universe? Because in liberal thought, he is the center of the universe. In non-liberal thought, in some societies, the individual is nothing. We don't want that society where individual is like, I don't know, Afghanistan, we don't count. But most Western societies not find a balance. And the Israeli case is that the family is as important, maybe more important in many cases than the individual, and that is, I think, the main difference that you can find. Sorry about the decision, I will be very brief. Yeah, so basically I would say that we all have a problem, but in general in Israel, one very large section of the society, which is all people who keep the Shabbat, it means that there are long periods where you are not allowed to use any electronic device. Not television, not radio, not even not to light the light. If it's already on, it's okay, but you cannot. I would say that more than 30% of Jews, on Friday evening before they put it on, and they do not touch it until the next day. The same, not only once a week, but also the Passover and other. So this is something that creates. By the way, this is the reason why in Israel. It's the only country where the number of readers of paper newspaper in the weekend is not going down, because they cannot read the electronic one, so they have to read it. So this is just one example. So this is one part. Another part is that effectively, this is what, my family is not very religious. I am traditional, but I'm not very strict in this. But in general, it is very popular to find activities for the children that make it impossible. So, okay, I'm not saying that my child never is like this, but the fact that for instance, we have you have like the Young Pioneers. Yeah. So you have all kinds of groups that twice a week. So after the school. So let's say between 3 and 7. They do all kinds of excursions, activities, so they cannot be like this because they go out and do something that it's not obligatory like school, but de facto everyone is in Israel. A lot of people are like signing up their children to all kinds of after-school activities. Like it can be. Basketball, it can be even computers, but where they teach to write a computer, right? Programs, all kinds of activities that are forced on the kid, so that he doesn't have so much free time. Actually, of course, it's very easy when he's 6, 7, 8. It's harder when it's 13, 14, 15. But many of these youth groups are successful in being active even when someone is like 14, 15, 16, 17. And also we have something that is connected also with national service, because in theory when you're 18 in free school, you go to national service, or the army or national service, but there is in the last generation this idea of how can I make it meaningful, the national service. So many people, after they finish school, they have 1 year. It's called Pre-Army Academy, but it's not formal. Only those who want to go to it. But I would say that about 15–20% of young people go to it. It's voluntary for 1 year. And it's like a group of 20–30 people of the same age. And they go through 1 year of learning about history, ideology, values. They have these trips across all the country, walking, to learn the country by the legs, because they are training themselves to be the future leaders of the army. So they want, after they go into the army, to be eventually officers and leaders and generals, or many of them don't become generals, but after they're lieutenant or captain, and then let's say at 25 or 30 he leaves the army, but one he has. He has had a leadership role. He already gets out of the army like more grown up. Also, financially, when you are in the army gives you food, and so all your salary, you could save it. So those people are, you know, at 22, 23, 24, 25, they leave the army, they have like a saving that they save. They can do whatever, many times they can. Yeah, but I would say that actually most of the money they don't need for this travel. Actually, they usually, this is the nucleus for the money that when they marry and the first house, they have like $50,000 or something like, you know, to start. Then the parents have, but they have something of their own. You know, it's like some people start their own business with this. So it's a kind of, so these training academies, which are basically from the last 25 years, are again, they are, like the youth groups, they are unofficial, but de facto, they are especially appealing to actually elite kids. And so even kids who are from families that are not elite, but the mother says, oh, all the important people send their kids in, so I want to send also. So this, you know, has an effect of pushing the more ambitious from the young going over there. So of course, I'm not saying that to reach everyone. You can never reach everyone, but a good segment is going.
Anyway, I think we will have, you know, like another week to speak about different stuff. With this, we are finishing. Thank you very much for sharing so much with us. And I hope that we will continue to exchange in the program many times in the future. Hvala puno Matici još jednom što nas je sakupilo sve ovde i hvala i prijateljima koji su došli sa strane i što kaže i ljudima koji su danas učestvovali ovde. And finishing that with everything in Serbian. And I think we deserve one good drink. I think so.
Hvala isto